Hello, everyone, and welcome to Literary Nights with Unsolicited Press. I'm your host, Rosalia Scalia, and tonight we have two fantastic poets who are going to read from their books, which are forthcoming in December. Before we continue, however, I'd like to remind everyone to smash the like button and subscribe. And also, you'll be able to get notices for whenever we have another Literary Nights with Unsolicited Press or any other shows that Unsolicited Press decides to air. So, welcome to everyone, and welcome to our poets, Anne Lee Parrish and Robert Van Vliet. We're going to start with Anne. Anne, if you could tell us a little bit about your book that is forthcoming in December, the title of it, and we'll be looking forward to hearing you read. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I'm glad to be here. I'll be reading tonight from my forthcoming title, Diary of a False Assassin. Here's a picture of the cover. Please ignore the Post-its. Those are for my use only. It is coming in December, as I say, December 21st. So just a couple days before Christmas from Unsolicited Press. For me, this is volume number 3 of poetry. I'm delighted by that. I love working with Unsolicited Press, and I love writing poetry, which I've been doing since 2018. I've been writing prose for almost 40 years, but it wasn't until 2018 that I got into writing poetry. So I have a selection, all different kinds of poems. You'll quickly get a sense of, what I tend to favor and what I lean on imagery wise, but I'll get started. So the first poem I'm going to read is called Surrender. Mixed on a palette, caressed and smudge, we've no choice but to blend, assimilate, lose ourselves, surrender to greater numbers and hues. And when we've lost all sense of who we once were, we find we've made a dull mass of brown or gray, neutral, easy on the eye. Ask any decorator trying to stage a house for sale. Is that what racists fear? The loss of white skin? Or the sameness of tone that would make it hard to be in charge? Pull the trigger, tie the rope. Denial of our plainness. You fade from view, leave a hint of mauve and green. We're showgirls, platinum hair, pencil skirts in the daylight, not much on stage, guys and dolls. You hand me the coleus to transplant. Its roots dangle like lost thoughts, white border on its leaves, the color of a winter moon. You choose pearls plucked from a warm sea. Pink will never be mauve. Gray only touches green. How dear that strange desire tinged with blue. We dress for dinner. I choose black for its slimming effect. You go with a red skirt and green shoes to celebrate the season. The denial of our plainness, softened by the sky's purple song. Lifting brightness. Where the road bends west, the sky opens and the trees stand down for a while. Its light says it hangs over water. You know what I mean by that. A lifting brightness. Not like a smile, more like an idea of how things might be or were in an easier time. I love that wide stretch above us, how it invites us to something better, to be better in ourselves. Cardigans, circa 1962. Oh, those glamour girls with their cardigans, worn but not worn, draped on soft shoulders, arms still bare, sleeves hang, waiting to be filled. Like the ladies themselves, is that what they're trying to say? And when they slip their arms through for warmth or convenience, who wants loose sleeves hanging around anyway? Are they too busy, too practical to be bothered with love? Glide. She was a Hoosier from the Latin Quarter, went by Velma, then Angelique, pinned up her hair, bought a patent leather belt, red, squeezed her swollen feet into patent leather heels, also red. It's okay to reinvent yourself, especially when the first version's not so great. But sooner or later, the hair comes down, the belt and shoes slip off. Thank God they hurt like hell, but that little make-believe leaves a touch of joy in the eye, just knowing you can, for a little while, glide through the world as someone else. Flying to Maui. Let's sit in this small, cozy space, ours alone. No one joins. No one gets to say. The sea below folds and winks, living its own life, full of fish and sunken ships, no care for us. Clouds gather, holding all the light and shadow we've ever seen. Yet their absence would ease our worry about the bumps and jolts we swallow with our California Cabernet. The blue below greens and grays, broken by the white tips of waves, the island offers emeralds we didn't expect, azure water, black sand when we track it down. The red and white orchids along the path draw the eye, stir the heart, and remind us how weary we've become. Okay, now I'm going to skip forward. Big Thompson, 1976. In dry land, they pray for rain. Back home, rivers swell. You consider this from your perch on Flagstaff Mountain. Prairies roll east, Rockies stand west. 2 canyons over, the sky gathers in a lavender knot. You want a wild show, lightnings dance. Storms out here never disappoint. In the morning, news comes of a water wall. Some escaped, most didn't. How lucky you were to be above it all, loving a sky no less beautiful for the curse it held. And that's a genuine event that actually happened in Colorado in 1976. Universe. You have to look away for it to happen. In that little blindness, things turn on. Think of the watched pot. Turning off is an event too, just as hard to nail down. One's life, existence, is always connecting and hanging up on everything around. Stars within us shift, wink out. Each of us is a universe, full of darkness, graced now and then by a brilliant point of light. Hang on a sec. Here we go. How it will always be. Her bare feet slap the asphalt. His sneakers stride in silence, yelling, of course, ugly words. He won't slow down. She can't go faster. This is how it will always be. She wants justice. He wants to run, but won't. He faces her. She says her piece. You made me bleed. A list of things that are yellow. Sunlight, egg yolk, daffodils, a rare diamond, amber, anything not alive. Our house, a sickly skin tone, bruises. The car you owned when we met, butter, lemons, fallen leaves, pineapples, the tie you tried to strangle me with, the straw in the ice water they gave me to drink at the police station, your madness, my fear in staying so long. Hang on. Dancing off. Pleasures overtake us we can't keep up. Some go, some are kept, but smaller, so much less delightful. Youth is heady and desperate. Age is a struggle to stand on one foot. Just when you balance, you tilt. Cogs loosen. This is how we glide away from the world, dancing off, step by clumsy step. How things end. Everything has a center, everything a lost edge. It feels like we're about to disappear. So we cling to that center, to what we think we know, never realizing that how things end might matter more than how they begin. Uninvited. I love you because you love me. No better reason. Golden magnet, sweet wine, honeyed words so easily sung. This is what we're born to. Seek, hunger for, claim. Like rage, love lands unannounced, uninvited, just like fear. And it's fear, we answer, as we weigh love's worth, ponder the cold cell our hearts become. Should we shun it, make excuses, run off into that long, predictable, uneasy quiet called loneliness? I'm looking at the time. I'll give you a couple more. Today, June 24th, 2022. Today, when the patriarchs turn women into livestock, here you are, radio on high, giving forth. Your nose ring catches the light. Your shaved head says, don't touch. Crank up the volume. That's rock and music you've got there. You won't hide underground, lie in your own blood, die. Not today. Today you sing for all you're worth. Stoning the lake. Let's skip stones while waves ripple the shore. Flat ones are best. Tap, tap, tap over the water they go until gravity drowns them. Stones can't drown, only breathers choke. This lake won't last, you say, it's lower every day. It's just as blue, and the sunlight dances just as fast. We're the ones dying, and in our grief, stone the lake. Now, everything is now, this moment, this instant. Pass your eyes over these words, they are now. The next line is now too. At the end, your reflection of what you have read is now. Remembering is now, even though what you remember took place earlier, a second ago, yesterday, last year, before you were born. What you see ahead in an hour, or when bones crumble from age and names can't find your tongue, is now. The stone steps worn down by the pious are now. The end of time is now. Hold infinity in your heart, behind your eyes, in your fingertips, as you shuffle your cards, everything that flashes or gently leads the tawny prairie toward dawn, or dims bit by bit until darkness calls it home, is now. So I'm going to give you two more. 20 years. 20 years you've been gone, and that's just how long you've been dead. In life, you were gone too. I was a pool you drowned in. If you ever got your feet wet, you kept your feet dry. How hard to hold the truth, like a bitter seed under your tongue. At the end, you spit it out. I guessed what you said before your tongue stilled for good. I had eyes. I said I forgave you. It was my turn to lie. And now I will read the title story, which is the last one. Diary of a False Assassin. It starts with love, or a lot of like. He's crazy cute, right? He'll say anything to make you let him. It takes you by surprise, even though you know how it works. Hoping it wouldn't doesn't equal a plan to prevent it. You don't tell anyone, then you tell everyone. Have it, don't have it. Here's the number of the clinic. I'll drive you myself. It's out of state. If you don't have it, you're a murderer. Puzzle of the day. If that thing in your stomach has no brain and no heart, why is it more important than you? Because you have no value except to bear things. You're an incubator, an earthen vessel, and now, with a thought to your own future, a killing machine, a false assassin.
Beautiful, such powerful poetry,
You,
and really love a lot of the images. And we'll get to that more after we hear Robert read from his book. Robert, let us know the title of your book, and we're interested in your poetry right now.
Sure, thanks. And thanks for having me. Yeah, the book is called Vessels. Um, and it was written over the course of about a year and a half in 2020 and 2021. And what I did was I set myself the exercise of writing every day, which is something I try to do anyway. But I had been having a hard time just doing anything. So I found an old writing exercise where you pick 5 words and some kind of an adage or a saying of some kind, and you need to integrate them all into a poem, and you have about 10 minutes to do it. So most days throughout 2020 and 21, I would set a timer. I would pick words at random, and I would pick a line. And what I decided to do was choose lines at random from various books. So I would take the book and count how many pages and count how many lines, and then roll dice or do a number generator online to find a page and find a line. And then I had to use part of that, as much of that line as I could. And then I had a table of words, about 120 of them. And I would just cycle through randomly from these 120 words. So after a while, I would switch the words out because I felt like I kept landing on the same words. Oh God, an egg again, really? Or whatever, I kept landing on color, green again with the green. So I would change things up a little bit. And these writing exercises, I did about 7 of them, but only 3 ended up, well, 3.5, started actually generating any work that I thought was any good. So that's kind of a preamble. When I was done, I took the entire text of the book, stripped all punctuation and line breaks, and turned it into a big giant text block. And then made a bunch of columns, printed them out, and cut them up and scrambled them like cards. And then I went in and I did a erasure exercise, and I generated a bunch of poems from that, and that they sit periodically throughout the book. And I've never read any of them really out loud. And I thought I would do one of them tonight, and it's actually the opening piece. And I've never really read it out loud before, but whenever I read it, I always hear Laurie Anderson reading it. So I'm not going to be able to do a Laurie Anderson impersonation, but that's the voice in my head when I'm hearing this. So I'll be reading a few from the book is in 3 parts. So I'll be reading a few from the first section, and then from the second, and then from the third. And I'll say a little bit about each one because they changed. But so this first untitled thing. That is not. This. Stop running. This is the only way. Dogs, riverbeds, escape, kindness, perfect thought, peace, repose, weariness, the mountain, the weather, memory, reason. You long for more because praying will not help. Burn it. Burn the smallest prayers every night and say you will want to wait for each eye, hand, hair like floods, green light, fingers over you. So the first section, I used the I Ching. So I would flip coins and generate hexagrams. And I chose images and words from the write-ups. And that's part one. And I'm going to be reading one. They're all very short because I had a 10-line constraint. So I had to keep them short. In and out. Very punk. So this is the first one, number one. The gentle wind above the houses. Everything that is new is not new. Heaven creates itself without doing anything. A long river like a claw, a flat cloud stained like a bloody liver. What else but this can any of it mean? 2. Fire in the lake and clouds of ash. The heavens are within the mountain, just as wisdom listens from within the ancient water. Seeds return to roots, return to seeds. 3. To swim over the green earth as thunder swims over the mountains. And we will meet beneath the lake to drink in readiness. It is in such gatherings, in reverence and in grief, that we meet the unforeseen. And together we will walk the round road until the few seem to be the 10,000 things. 4. Tell me, what do you mean by good? Laying in warm grass, forgiveness and fire, a woman caught in thunder and rain? The tail knows what the head guesses. 5. That which is bright rises twice, once through blood, once through the 4 lit corners of the world. It is good to die by a window, looking out upon the distant law. Where there were 2, there is now only fire, thunder and no lightning, lightning and no cloud. 6. As new bone stitches itself with time, we must sit with our ears to the gentle wind, listening to the red clay cracking in the empty lake. And we must help each other. And 7. Thwart evil, nurture goodness. This is easy to say, but difficult to do. Like drawing a bird from a stone. But the sky remembers what the tongue can no longer pronounce. So the second section, I drew lines from Thoreau's journal, the big New York Review of Books edition. It's a single edition. And once again, drawing at random from roughly the same list of words. So there's lots of mountains and lakes and rivers and fish and eggs and hair and lots of colors, because I'm a glutton for punishment. And the titles of each of the poems are the diary entry from the journal itself. But I left off the years, which is how 2020 felt to me. Like it was July, and then it was October, and then it was June, and then it was March, and then it was March again, and then it was still March, and then it was November, and then all of a sudden it was October again. So I have a few from part 2 to read. July 5th. No matter how many times I asked, the instructions were no help. So I stood by the window, watching the buses pass, all bound for parking lots as empty as a table after the eviction. And as the day began, I could see some stars, as surprising as catching a handful of small water bugs skating on a lake of ash. October 18th. As yellow as a faint shadow, a tall ribbon hanging from the moon. Seeds for spring, flies for summer, Tupelo for autumn, and for winter, evergreen. The tail whispers as the skin sleeps. Page turn. June 27th. Works go steadily forward, one cold whisper after another. But I will have nothing to do. Before me is a seed as big as a moon, a lifeless beginning, as sanguine as a myth waiting to be understood. There is nothing to do, and I will do it. May 17th. The smoke is dirty brown, very nearly the color of the sky. You cannot quite tell the difference between tooth and skin, meadow and moat. You struggle with anything that sounds like a word, and you are afraid to ask if the stones can form sentences as well as walls. July 14th. Didn't I already do July 14th? See what I mean? Now I'm like July 15th, March, October. Where am I? Who am I? What's going on? Okay, fugue state. I'm back. All right, July 14th. I spoke of good and evil like neighbors or roommates. I would see them come and go, always late for their appointments, never stopping to chat. Always with a smirk in the corner of their mouth, always in the know. I was new, and it took me years to fall through the blind suburban syllable, which was then but another name for the extended world for me. October 21st. The tall grasses, sensitive as the fine hair on your arm, stand silently, offering no solace and giving no advice. You can say anything to them, and they will keep your secret. With mud on your knee, you perform sacrament and purification. November 16th. Did we just had an October 16th? I don't even know. I'm not, thankfully I'm not keeping track. Not my job, not my department. Let the people with spreadsheets deal with it. All right, 16 November. The water whispers to the seed as it lies on its belly in the cold morning. Like me, it is waiting for that sudden bolt of joy when you know you have once again evaded death. For the most part, and I do not know why, the universe is unaccountably kind to me. March 19th. Is it something in the skin? Is it something within the dry voice we hear as the fire steps quietly along with us as we go from song to song, from dream to dream? Is it in the ancient and unexhausted energies of this new country? So part 3 is the longest. It's as long as the first 2 sections combined. And I drew on a text called the Nag Hammadi Library. Sometime in the 2nd century CE, as they say in academia, some monks buried a bunch of their scriptures in a big giant vessel in the sand during a book purge. There were people who were burning books and purging non-canonical texts and Gnostic texts from monasteries all over Egypt. And these people grabbed a bunch of the books that would otherwise have been destroyed and hid them, expecting presumably to come back for them eventually. And they stayed buried for about 2,000 years, when they were unearthed accidentally in 1945 by a young man named Muhammad Ali, in fact, as it turns out, who brought them home. His mom burned a few in the stove, not really thinking that they were that important. And they kind of disseminated out over the next several decades. And they finally were translated all at once. And they're all kinds of strange gospels, like the Gospel of Thomas and the Gospel of Mary Magdalene and the Apocryphon of John, and all of these strange texts that had been rejected by the Orthodox, or what would eventually be called the Orthodox Church. And they're very weird. And they tell a very different version of Christianity than what we might read looking at the 4 canonical Gospels, for instance. So this 3rd section has kind of, the first one is very mystical. The second one is very diaristic. And this one is Very weird. So anyway, I have a few from this, and then I have one more after that. These are just numbered because I'm usually a real title person. Like I come up with the titles, but this whole book, there's no titles. So anybody who reads this, they think, this guy, I don't like him so much. No titles for his poems. I'm done with him. It's like, no. I usually do titles, seriously. But just not this time. So I'm sorry for people who are into titles. I am too. All right, number 11. This one I'm jumping around because they're all over the place. All right, number 11. The flesh teaches us what we would forget, what we would never want to know, that our heart is a foundering ship, its cargo contraband, waiting on the rocks, a whisper lost beneath the rain and wind, waiting for the tide to return what the tide stole. And we will believe that he rose from the dead. Yeah, no, not going to read that one. Not tonight. All right, number 15. Because I trusted you with all my strength, I thought it fine to swallow my anger like a moon, sit motionless as you threw acid and daggers at everything I thought I loved, until I loved only the hope of trust and the dream of you at last dissolving your daggers in the acid. And together we would watch the sun rise like forgiveness. Number 27. The sand, fleeing the sky, whispers against you, praying for help. You will not help. Hands to the sun, you will pray for help. The sun will not help. The sun will turn to the night and try to burn it. The night will not burn. The night will smother the sky, smother the sun, smother you, smother the sand. Indeed, even the smallest ones never listen to prayers they believe are fake. Number 28. It is your custom. Refuse everything. Teach nothing. Bolt your doors every night and say to yourselves, when will they come and take back what is theirs? And then this is actually the last poem of the book. It has a title, the only title in the entire book. So get ready. 4 lessons. Through the gift of the Spirit, the 4 lights appeared. What does this mean? Through the gift. It means help is always near, but not always near enough. What does this mean, of the Spirit? It means that what is true is always true, but not always true enough. What does this mean, the 4 lights? It means it is always day, even when we are trapped deep within the earth. What does this mean, appeared? It means even the mutable is fixed, like a leaf always withering and always unfolding. I'm looking at the time. Do I have one more? Yeah, one more. All right. This should only take about 45 minutes. So carb up. No, I'm kidding. It's not that long. Okay. Back to titles. I've got a poem with a title. This is called Leaving the Story Unfinished. And the funny story about this, which I will finish, the story about the poem about the unfinished. Anyway, when I had finished the book and I had submitted it and people had been rejecting it, which was delightful, and then Unsolicited picked it up, which was also delightful, and we were in the middle of like looking at cover designs and proofs and galleys and all of that, I found another poem from one of the other sequences. So I had done 7 or 6, 7, 8, something like that. And most of them were complete disasters. They just crashed and burned and they were terrible. And the only 3 that generated anything were the 3 that became this book. Or so I thought. So I found a short sequence, which ended up actually producing a poem, which I now feel would have been a really good preface to this. So it's a preface, so of course I'm reading it last, right? So whatever. So this is called Leaving the Story Unfinished. And I think I used the Oxford Shorter Dictionary to build this one, which at the time felt like a complete disaster, but I guess it turned out okay. So Leaving the Story Unfinished, a short poem in 6 parts. You said it was a cloud. I said it was birds. You said I was afraid. I said I was cold. You said the spirit had entered you. I said it was dust. You said it was a temple. I said, that's just another name for war. You said, adrift on the dry lake, the fish looked up at us like lost stars trying to bite the wind. I asked, is it more than letting your skin unfurl like a thirsty leaf? You said, it is more than simply setting it down and walking away. I said, the silent bishops toss their feathers over the rim of the white wall. You said, they will not teach you the name of every magnificent rite. They will only whisper the same secrets over and over. I said, do you remember, cut roughly from the bolt, its bias confessing almost nothing, but leaving the story unfinished? You said, remember those faint patterns in the weave beneath our fingertips? We will never know whether they were blood or wine. I asked, can you hear them walking away, stepping lightly over the war as it grinds the moon down to sand? You asked, do you really think they will just leave us alone and forget all about us, like apples once the seeds have been stolen? I said, they always wore the sun at their hips like a warning, smoke on their tongues. They gave away nothing. You said, what seemed to us like shadow or spice was the false rain of rumor and sorrow. I said, this lethal breath is more tireless, more true than the sunset. We fled before it, exhausted.
Wow, such wonderful poetry from both of you. 2 very different styles, but equally powerful. So, we'll start with Robert. Robert, what inspired you to do all of that exercise work to create a poetry? Like that seems like a lot of work to get to some words. Like what inspired all of that? I mean, writing is tough. We all know it, but you sort of made it 10 times tougher.
I did. I kind of did, didn't I? Well, it really, I mean, it came down to, it was the ragged, exhausted end of the previous presidential administration. And as we were heading into the COVID lockdowns, work was drying up. We were at home, and I had already been kind of running with a bit of a writer's block. So I had already been feeling like I need to break out. I just need to keep working. I need to keep feeling like I'm generating work and moving forward. And once we hit that COVID spring and summer, I just felt completely stalled out. And so I thought I need to just build something every day. And I think that if I had been, if I knew how to draw, or if I'd been a painter or something like that, I probably would have just been doing a little, I don't know, doodle or something every day, just something. So every day I would sit down and I would have nothing. And I was just writing about the news. I was journaling basically. And I'm like, well, that's a good exercise. It's good to, just to have that kind of outlet. But it was just mostly me journaling and being just, pissed off and desperate and whatever. So I thought I need to have somebody else choose what I'm going to write about, and give me some kind of direction. And so I started just playing with different writing exercises that I've given to students and to myself over the years. different kinds of like opening books at random, or listening to the radio and like having different kinds of sounds and just all kinds of things. And when I finally hit on this thing, which is called the 10-minute spill, 10 minutes like that, it just started clicking. And I felt like I can sit down, give myself 10 minutes every day, and just, I don't know what I'm going to write about until I sit down. Because that was the other thing I started dreading. It's like every time I sit down, it's going to be more of this COVID and all this nonsense. And this way, I didn't have to stress about what I'm going to write about, and is it going to be just the same cranky, crabby nonsense that it you know. So that was basically the motivation, is that I just needed to generate work, and weird, stupid things with eggs and fish and trees and hair is better than a blank page just, staring at you, like this. So that was basically it.
Yeah, I think a lot of writers struggle through the COVID. Some people sort of took the COVID lockdown as a real inspiration, and they got to busy and they were working, but others just really wilted under the stress of the last administration and the number of deaths and stuff.
And I thought I was one of them. I mean, like when I got to about June of 21 and I realized I had like this fat pile of, I mean, I kind of couldn't believe it, and I felt a little bit kind of appalled that that I felt like I had used this stressful time of mourning and despair and anger, and I had used it somehow to generate, I don't know, it was a very strange feeling that I was both really glad that I had been working, but it felt very, very almost exploitative. I left out a couple of poems that if I were to have read them to you, you would never in a million years guess, but it was, at the time I was living in Minneapolis. I'm over in St. Paul now, but I was living in Minneapolis, a few blocks north of Lake Street. And I used to drive through 38th and Chicago all the time, past Cup Foods. And, so we were just a few miles away from where George Floyd was murdered. And, we watched sort of everything going on. And it felt exploitative to use that time that way. So I guess I'm glad that at the time I didn't realize it, because I needed to have that outlet. So I don't know, kind of talking around, but anyway, so yeah, it was a very strange time, and it was a very strange time for artists in particular. Right? Well, it was a strange time for everybody. Yeah.
And Anne, your poems very powerful, but also with the same undercurrent of tension in yours. Like the tension is there in both of them, but it's one, yours was very visceral. I mean, Yellow really struck me, the poem, the things yellow, and also the title, one very prescient for the times. So can you talk a little bit about how you ended up approaching your work, because the tension is there, and the title of The False Assassin is very powerful, because the first thought is spy, but did you really get it's women are really now considered false assassins based on the political
Yeah, as you say, the previous presidential administration was ghastly. It was god awful. And I'm just, I don't care what your political persuasion is. The Republicans are appalling to me. Donald Trump is appalling. And I'm 66 years old. I've been around a long time. I remember when Roe v. Wade passed and became the law of the land. This infuriates me. It infuriates me that people would spend time denying women their autonomy. Don't you have anything better to do? Apparently not. Okay, great. So, in my prose, I'm not particularly a political writer, but in my poetry, I am, and I've become much more political. So I sort of look at my work as being informed by a definable set of things: politics, women's rights, absolutely, nature, things that I've experienced, places I've been, visited, and have formed an affection for. So that is in there too. Um, I've been writing a lot of poetry about my late mother. She's been dead for 22 years. I had a very, very difficult relationship with her. She was a very difficult person. So she is in a lot of my poetry, not as a uniformly horrible person. There's Wendy, I talked to her as the ghost. When she died, I had a lot of dreams about her. And in one of them early on, we were sitting at a lunch counter and I looked at her and I said, what's it like being dead? And she answered me in the dream. She said, it's not that bad. So she is in a lot of my work, this very difficult character. So politics, women's rights, nature, my family, my birth family, tough people. They were tough to live with and to be around. But all of that shaped me. It made me, my father was a professor, an English scholar at Cornell University, Wordsworth scholar. He was so opposed to my becoming a writer. It's the craziest thing. But, so that, was an inspiration, and just, people telling you, don't do this, do something else, but we don't know what the something else is. It's just don't do that. So all of these things come in my poetry, a lot of it.
The other
But
poem
now,
that
I love
struck me
politics.
was the police station. Like, was that still yellow? Was that
Yeah, that
yellow?
was yellow,
That was
and
yellow.
that's
Okay.
never happened to me. I've never actually been in a police station, except when I was returning some items I found that someone had thrown away. That a teacher's backpack had gotten stolen, and the grade books were in there and the papers. I thought, oh, they're gonna want this, so I took it down to the police station in Seattle, where I was living at the time, and they were like, "Okay, thank you." But yeah, that was an intense poem to
But
write.
that's also political because it sort of speaks to the lack of rights. So
Yeah,
talk about the
uh,
real event that happened in Colorado.
yeah,
That
yeah,
was
the big
really a
Thompson
wonderful
farm.
poem.
Yeah,
So what happened? Like,
1976.
what was how did that come to inspire you?
No, just because we had just moved to Colorado, my future husband and I, in that year, 1976. I was 18 years old. And Flagstaff Mountain, I don't know if you're familiar with the geography, the Flatirons are right outside of Boulder, Colorado. Flagstaff is a city park that you drive up this winding hill. And we were up there thinking, oh, wow, this is so great, because we had moved out from New Jersey. Colorado is nothing like New Jersey. And we were kind of, really grooving on it and thinking how great it all was. And we looked up to the north and the sky was really dark. And we thought, oh, that looks like a thunderstorm up there. And then we saw the lightning. And the thing about that geography is that there are these narrow canyons, a series of narrow canyons, and the Big Thompson River flooded. And this wall of water came rushing down that canyon. We weren't anywhere near it, but 200 people drowned in that thing. Homes that were, at the base of the canyon, they got washed away. And so now when you drive in Colorado and those canyons, there are signs, public service signs that say, climb to safety. In other words, get out of your car and climb up the side of the road, and don't stand there looking, going, hey, look at all that water. I wonder if it's going to reach us. But yeah, that was, I wonder if it's good. I wonder if we're going to get wet. But yeah, that was a real thing that happened. And we thought, whoa, that was intense.
That's amazing. Getting back to the tension in both of your poetry, I wanted, Robert, can you talk about that? You talked about where you got the words from for your last part. It was the book of the whatever.
Yeah,
What was that
yeah
book again?
the Nag Hammadi library. Nag Hammadi, which I think is the name of the town where or the nearest where the things were dug up in Egypt. Yeah, so it's called the Nag Hammadi Library, and it's probably 40 or 50 short things, and there are passages from Plato in there as well. So it's not just like the Gospel of, Mary Magdalene or whatever. It's also, it was just all of, maybe not all, but it was many of some monasteries' special books in their little library. They had a little library of maybe 50, 60 books, and they buried all of them out in the desert. And these scrolls were preserved in the dry Egyptian air for probably 18 or 1900 years.
That's amazing. That's
It is
absolutely
amazing.
Yeah. And some of them, anyway.
So go ahead. I was going to say a lot of writers who are either emerging or new at writing often listen to this this show every other week. So talk little bit about your writing process. Robert, you told us about that big, that process that you went through, but I'd like to hear from Anne. And how do you write prose and poetry? How do you approach each one? And also, how do you approach your daily? Do you have a daily writing craft? Do you keep a journal? Like, talk a little bit about how you approach each one and your daily practice.
I try to write every day. Some days I'm much more prolific than other days. Some days I'm stalled and I find that I'm playing a lot of, solitaire on my computer. Um, Prose and poetry both, they seem to start with an image or an idea, particularly for poetry. Something I've seen, something that I've thought about, watching the sunlight, what's it doing in the evergreen tree, and then building a moment from that, building an experience, and what are the observations, and how is the reader going to navigate that with me. A short story, because I do all short stories and novels, a short story is also very image inspired, a single moment that I can build something around. A novel is not quite that way. A novel to me is an extended conversation about a topic. And since I'm so into women's rights, my recent book, The Hedgerow, is set in 1949, when women did not have a lot of autonomy. And I used that as a cautionary tale. I hope it will be seen that way. But that's more, as I say, a dialogue, and what are the parts, what does it all mean, and what it is like to experience that. And, where's the power, and who's got power and who doesn't have power. And it's much more, novels are much more involved, and they're very, very challenging. For me, I
Mm-hmm.
find poetry so easy compared to writing a novel. A novel is so hard. But I'm doing it again. I told Summer I will give her a novel in a year to be published in 2027. So I've got got to get going on that.
Well, that's
20,000
inspiring because
words
I'm
in,
also
so
working
I'm
on a
okay,
novel.
but
So yeah.
it's a lot.
So talk about your daily. You said you're playing. How do you actually do? You write in the morning? Do you write for an hour? Some people use the Pomodoro method. Like, talk a little bit about your approach. And Robert,
Every
please join
morning, and I
in.
sit down and I say, okay, what am I going to work on today? So for the last couple days, I've been going through what will be poetry book number 5. This is also coming out in 2027. I don't have a title for it yet, but each poem is on a page. It's in a 3-ring binder, and I just started at the beginning with my pencil, line by line, making all the changes. That's taken several days. Getting those edits typed up and then printed out again, so that I now have the most current version. But I'm always peeking at it, generating a new poem, picking at the other ones, editing. That it's this whole sort of rolling process. And my 2 big projects are this novel and this collection of new poetry. And among all of that, because I have several books in the works, if a galley comes back, I've got to read that. I've got to go through all of that. I have 2 titles that had been with another publisher. This other publisher changed their distributor, and the distributor told them, okay, all the titles that are not selling particularly well, we do not want to keep in print. So this other publisher, this was before I came over to Unsolicited, said to me, we're not going to keep your books in print anymore. We'll do the Kindle version, but we're not going to do the print. You can pay us $200 and we'll keep it in print. And I thought, So I wrote Summer and I said, would you be interested in bringing out these 2 titles? And I thought, she's going to say no, because who wants this? And she said, yeah, I'll do that. And I thought, okay. So now we're doing those, and on a really super fast track. We had to get the cover design. And I had to scrounge and find Word documents. I mean, these books were published 10 and 11 years ago. I didn't know where the Word documents were. Finally found them. So there's that. So there's the creative stuff and there's the administrative stuff. And then I do Substack articles and I do essays. So it's all of this. And I read other people's books and I write blurbs for them. And I'm a poetry reader for the Atlanta Review. And so I suspect in a couple weeks, they're going to send me an email saying, oh, you got 20 submissions to read. Now, a submission will have 5 poems. So that's like 100 poems to read.
Well, you definitely are busy. So, Robert,
busy.
how do you approach your daily practice?
Well, I was going to say it sounds like your process is the perfect sort of process for someone with ADD or something. Like, just when one thing gets boring, you move over to something else, and then you come back again. It's like, right? So, yeah. So my process, it's varied over the years, but I generally try to write roughly the same time every day, which tends to be very early in the morning on waking up. And then there's sometimes later in the day. And it depends on my work schedule and other kinds of life things, obviously, because life. For me, in general, I came to poetry through 2 different rooms, or through 2 different places at once. In high school, I thought I was either going to be a novelist and like write big, giant, like sprawling, messy, weird things, or I was going to be a songwriter. And so those were the 2 things that I was focusing on. I didn't really do poetry. I didn't really think about it. And it was a while before I thought that poetry and songwriting actually have a lot in common. But poetry also had something in common with fiction and novel writing, because I found myself thinking, well, I had come up with a really good opening line for a story, but I couldn't think of where to go next. And I found myself wondering, I wonder if I could write a story I wonder if I could tell a story without telling a story. And I kind of played with that for a while, and it was years before I was like, oh, that's poetry. That's what poetry, your poetry is telling a story without telling a story. You're either going to leave a bunch of stuff out, or you're going to add things in that normally wouldn't be in the story. And once the penny dropped on that, that was where I started going to. So for me, the fiction writing and the novel writing is where a lot of like dialogue or characters come from. Mm-hmm. But with the songwriting and the music, that I would start with sounds first. Like there were times where I would just write strings of words that sounded good together or felt good in the mouth. Like they didn't necessarily mean anything. And then I would challenge myself, okay, well, if they meant something, what would happen next? And that's sort of the storytelling part of it. So I'd be like, okay, well, I have this cool line. I don't know what it means, but if it meant something, what would happen after that? So, so for me, I still try to, I'll have music on, but usually not with words. And if I do have words, there are times where I'll have like several things playing at once. Like I'll have a podcast on, and back when we used to have radio, I would have radio on, just to have like, I can't quite hear what they're saying and I can't quite hear what they're saying. REM was a great band for me in the 80s because I never knew what they were saying. And I was like, oh, that sounds great. I'll use that line. And it turns out that they were not saying anything like that at all. And I have my own song lyrics that are basically my own syllabalizing of REM, people like that. I love lyricists who mumble, singers who mumble. I don't want to understand what you're saying. Give me 15, 20 listenings before I'm like, oh, I get it. You're in a car. Oh, okay. Whatever. So, yeah. So for me, I start in the morning very early, always longhand. I have thousands of these things. They're called pencils. Older people know what they are. I actually have a pencil sharpener and everything. I'm so 1980s. Okay. I've heard Trapper Keepers are back in style, by the way. I don't
Oh,
know. Trapper Keepers was my generation. That was like 80s, 90s, and now apparently they're a thing. They probably have a TikTok account, so now all the kids know about Trapper Keepers, is my guess. Anyway, sorry. What was the question?
okay. We have actually 1 minute left, and I wanted both of you to give each of you to give a positive message to people who aspire to become writers. What's the one big advice you want to let them know? Kind of keep it pithy and
I would say learn how to trust your instincts, but do what you have to do to develop those instincts. And that's a lot of work, trial and error. You learn what works and you learn what doesn't work. And you trust that.
Yep.
And you keep going. And you don't let anybody talk you out of what you're doing because you believe in it and you're working at it and you're going to get what
Yep.
you need to go.
Yep. Exactly.
Bravo. And Robert,
Let's
can you add
yes.
to that?
Let somebody else say no for you. I used to not submit thinking that, oh, they're not going to be interested. Like, no. Give them the chance to say no. You say yes to yourself. I would say my big advice is to waste more time. Don't worry about like being precious about time frame or like if it takes 3 hours to just sit around and stare out the window, if that's what it takes to get 2 words on the page, that's got to be enough because this is all about sitting in a room by yourself for a long time, and you have to be okay with that, and it's going to take a long time. So don't be precious about the outcome. The outcome will take care of itself. Let somebody else say no. You need to say yes to yourself. Yeah.
Okay. So on that note, I want to thank everyone who was listening. We got a heart, so thank you for whoever sent the heart. Our next literary nights with Unsolicited Press is in 2 weeks. I believe that's September 18th. So please join us on September 18th. And good night, everyone. And thank you for joining. Good night, everyone. Bye
Good
bye.
night. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.